What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. All right, moving on to our mailbag. 4 questions for you guys. Hi, Jason. Watching the Lakers-Pelicans semifinal, I was really stunned over Zion's fitness levels. Guys like Chuck and Stephen A. blasting him off during the broadcast. Clearly, the messaging over the offseason that he was in the best shape of his life was just PR spin. And it's evident that it's affecting his ability to consistently be the downhill force that we anticipated from him. I haven't watched a ton of Pelicans basketball this season, so I don't have a good feel over what this team needs to take the next step. But would you look to trade him now just to get rid of the distraction, even if it's for 30 cents on the dollar? The Pels are doing fine with this version of Zion, so a case could be made to keep him and hope he gets in shape. I would counter that now is the best time to move him because the team's playing well with Ingram empowered as the number one option, and guys like Trey Murphy back from injury. Would love your thoughts because I've been going back and forth over this, but I've just lost faith in his ability to take his fitness seriously. So here's the thing. None of us really know how bad it is, right? What I mean by that is we don't really know what Zion Williamson's attitude is like. We hear stories, we hear secondhand accounts, right? But what we don't see, we're not actually in the room. Like I saw Stephen A. Smith do this thing this morning. It's like, oh, every chef in New Orleans wants to be friends with Zion because they know he'll eat everything. I'm like, that's some weird anecdotal shit that what do you even make of that, right? We don't actually know what his eating habits are like. We don't actually know what his workout habits are like. We don't know how committed he is in the film room. We don't know how committed he is in practice. So a lot of this is guesstimation, right? For instance, I heard a lot of people slandering Zion for his defense over the past week. And I've actually thought he's had some moments as a help defender this year. Not a good week, but this year, I think he's had some moments as a help defender. And so, I think a little bit gets sensationalized for the sake of the take. You know what I mean? That said, it is deeply concerning from the standpoint, LeBron James looked more athletic than him in that game. That can't happen because that's what you came into the league as, is one of the best athletes we've ever seen. And so, from that standpoint, if I'm inside that franchise and I know because of firsthand information that this is a shit show and that he's a lost cause from a personality standpoint, meaning he's never going to be willing to do the work, then yeah, you need to look to move him. But definitely not right now. This would be the worst time to move him because Zion is good at basketball. And there will be some 10-game stretch over the course of the next 40 where he averages, 29, 10, and 7 and shoots 62% from the field. He's going to have a better stretch of games. And if internally you want to move him, you don't do it now. You wait and you find an opportunity when his value is at a higher level at this point. There's just no rush because, as you said, they are good right now. Now, in the big picture, looking at this team, let's talk about what the identity of the Pelicans should be. Because what I really look at here is essentially a version of the Boston Celtics, right? Because you have all of this rangy length on the wing, right? It's Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones and Trey Murphy and Dyson Daniels. Even CJ McCollum is a 6'6" kind of lanky guard, right? Although he's nowhere near the athlete and defensive player that those guys are. But I kind of look at this more as a driving kick team. And so what I would view the long-term version of this team is finding more of a athlete rim protector. Think someone in the Nick Claxton mold, right? And then essentially I would lean on just incredible length and athleticism at every position where all the guys can dribble and shoot except for Claxton, right? And then you run essentially a screen and roll system, or you could probably get away with 5. I haven't seen a lot of Nick Claxton lately to know if he'd be up for that, but it just depends on what type of player you get, right? Because we're not actually talking about Nick Claxton. I just mean that archetype, an athletic center that can protect the rim and switch out onto guards, right? In the big picture, that's what I envision this team as, is a long, switchy, athletic team that has a lot of ball handling and shooting to drive and kick you to death. And so right now, it's kind of this weird group where it's you have CJ McCollum, who's kind of like a slow down, like methodical, herky-jerky shot creator, right? Then you have Jonas Valanciunas, who's like this throwback center, who's like a post-up guy who can take threes, although teams don't really guard him out there, but is a below-average defensive player. And then you have like all these rangy wings in the middle. And so it's kind of like a weird mix of players. And even Zion as the 4 is a very strange fit from a basketball standpoint with everyone else. And so, again, in the short term, what I would do if I was running the Pelicans is you just ride it out to the deadline and you see how everything looks then and you make a call at that point. My guess is they're going to keep him. My guess is that they have no intentions of getting rid of Zion. But like, yeah, if you ask me what the best version of this team is, lean into your strengths. What is this team good at? We have lots of wings. Herb Jones is one of the best defenders in the league and is showing a lot of off the dribble pop this year, right? Trey Murphy is kind of like the opposite version of Herb Jones. He's the 3-and-D guy, whereas Herb Jones is like the D-and-3 guy, right? Like Trey Murphy's more of got a lot more off the dribble pop, a lot more a much more reliable jump shot. He could shoot it out to like almost 30 feet comfortably. More athletic than Herb Jones, in my opinion. So like you've got that. And then you got Brandon Ingram as like one of the best 3-level scorers and shot creators that we have in this league. And so like that to me would be the direction I'd go, is just leaning into your lanky athleticism, right? I think this team has looked its best when Dyson Daniels has been at the point guard position too, right? But like as far as it pertains to Zion, we don't know how bad it is. Only they do. And you sure as hell don't trade him now. You wait until you have better value at that spot. If the Warriors are in the same corner as the Celtics were back in 2021, 2022, which is about 500 in mid-January, which single trade would you suggest by them? Come trade deadline. The Celtics added Derek White, and they went 51-31 in total that season. Massive improvement since the addition. What trade is there for the Warriors to have a similar regular season and playoffs to those Celtics back in 2021, 2022? I said this with the Nerd Sesh guys the other day, but to me it's so clearly Siakam. For a couple of different reasons. One, I think he's going to be a little bit more affordable than some of the bigger names out there. Guys like OG Anunoby, guys like Lauri Markkanen. I just think they're going to be very expensive. Jeremy Grant, Jeremy Grant's a guy that I would consider as well, but I'd have him as a backup plan to Pascal Siakam. Siakam, to me, makes for a super dynamic defensive front line with Wiggins, Siakam, Draymond, right? Those three can switch and guard just about every position. And then Siakam has a ton of playoff experience too, not just with the Raptors when they won the title, but also with the Raptors before they won the title. The dude's guarded LeBron in the conference finals or the conference semifinals, I think. Obviously, he's he played awesome in the 2019 NBA Finals. And then also you can kind of structure his next deal in a way that makes sense to you in your team's future, right? So Siakam is the guy that I would target. I think I saw this stat today, just for you Warriors fans. The Warriors have played 3 games against teams that are below 500. 3 all season. As a point of perspective, the Suns have played 13 such games. So, like, I'm very much bullish on the Warriors still. I think they're a smart trade away from being a top-tier contender. That's why I can't write them off to this point. Siakam's the guy that I'd be targeting. Next one. Can someone please tell me if I'm crazy for preferring Lauri Markkanen over Siakam as a Warriors fan? Not crazy. It's just less achievable, right? Like, it's just Danny Ainge is going to want everything you have. And it's just not worth it if you have to give up Podziemski and Trayce Jackson-Davis and Moses Moody and Jonathan. Like, ideally, if you're the Warriors, Jonathan Kuminga is your big trade piece, right? Like, I saw a lot of Warriors fans in the comments like, Kuminga is one of our best players. And like, again, yeah, Jonathan Kuminga is an incredible athlete, and I'm very high on his long-term ceiling. But within the scope of this Warriors team, within the scope of this season, he's young, he's inconsistent, and it's a weird basketball fit in the 5-out system. And so, and to put it simply, he's your best asset. He's the guy that, like, if you call Masai Ujiri and you say, we're offering Kuminga in this deal, he's going to listen to you. Like, and again, if you want Pascal Siakam, you're not getting him for free. So Warriors fans, I wouldn't look at it as like, why would we trade Jonathan Kuminga? He's one of our best players. You'd be bringing back a player who would be definitively your second best player. Pascal Siakam, second best Warrior overnight. Pascal Siakam gives you one of the best starting 5s in the league overnight. That's the way you have to look at that deal. It's less about Kuminga and more about bringing in a veteran forward with tons of playoff experience who's a natural basketball fit that will anchor your defense with Draymond on the front line, and a guy that's just going to make you from a team that is capable of beating the best teams in the league on any given night to a team that will be favored against all the best teams in the league on any given night. That, to me, is the way that I would look at that dynamic. But as far as Lauri goes, totally different vibe, not as good of a defensive player, definitely bigger and stronger. But at the end of the day, it's just more about the price. I think Siakam's a more achievable goal in that situation. Lastly, looking back at the Sabonis-Halliburton trade, who do you think won that trade? Thanks, love the show. So obviously the Kings won that trade. I do think there's a little bit of revisionist history. There's two different ways to look at this, right? Like, one, the Kings have had just a horrible stretch of luck that has still led in their most interesting stretch of basketball over the last, basically since the early 2000s, right? This team is a ton of fun. They're really good. I've consistently had them in my power rankings this season. I'm a believer in the Kings. That said, obviously, having Halliburton go off as a bona fide superstar with the Pacers is discouraging because Sabonis is not that, right? And then drafting Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic is obviously a catastrophe. That said, let's zoom in on each thing individually. Did they fuck up on the Luka Doncic thing? You bet your ass they did. And I'm not sure there's a single Kings fan that would disagree. Hot take, Marvin Bagley, not as good as Luka Doncic. That was it was stupid in the moment. It's stupid now. It'll always be stupid. It was self-sabotage on their part. It was overthinking the job and they reaped some consequences from that, right? However, Halliburton was really good with the Kings. But none of us thought he was going to be this good. None of us thought that. I personally don't remember a single person saying when Halliburton was with the Kings, this dude has all-time great potential. I don't remember anybody saying that. That's the way I feel now. I think Halliburton has all-time great potential. And so it's revisionist history to be oh man, they missed out on Halliburton. Yeah, they did. But from the front office's perspective, you look at it and it's okay, they wanted to have an offensive fulcrum in the front court and just basically an anchor in the front court. They had these two excellent guards in De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton that they viewed to be a little bit redundant. And they made a deal that in the moment, everyone knew there was some potential that Halliburton would exceed Sabonis in the long run. But in the short run, they looked at it as an opportunity to do something that made more sense for that basketball team. And for the record, the Kings are a better team after the trade than they were before the trade because of that natural basketball fit and because Halliburton wasn't that good back then, right? So it's obviously unfortunate now to look back and be holy shit, Halliburton's probably better than Fox now. By the way, I do think Tyrese Halliburton is better than De'Aaron Fox. But that's new information. The information we had at the time, even though maybe I wasn't covering the league when that trade happened, and I was a little bit disconnected from the standpoint of the Pacers and the Kings individually. So obviously all the factors involved there, I don't know what I would have done if I was in that seat. That said, it's a lot more defensible in the moment than it is at this point in time, right? When you look back at that point in time, it's Sabonis for Halliburton. Halliburton's good. That's a tough player to give away, but Sabonis is good too. Sabonis and Fox are going to be incredible together. This is going to be interesting. This might work. That's the way you look at it, right? And then only now that we know Halliburton is a superstar, can we look back and be oh shit, that sucks. You know what I mean? But to me, the Luka Doncic piece surrounding Marvin Bagley, that was way more obvious of a screw up. Right. And so I think I think when we talk about the Kings, they've had a really unfortunate run of things. Some of it's self-inflicted, some of it's bad luck too. And again, that we were talking about with the Warriors with Kuminga, there's a version of this where you trade Kuminga for Siakam, and in 2 years, Kuminga makes an all-star team. And then 2 years after that, he makes an all-NBA team. And then 2 years after that, he's a top-tier superstar. That's on the table. I think it's far less likely, but it's on the table. And so, again, when you are operating as a front office, those are the kinds of risks that just kind of come with the job, if that makes sense.